Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping right into the source material, and our mission is pretty laser-focused. We are analyzing the current state of play for top destinations for business travelers, for expats right across the Asia-Pacific, because you need to know where those real opportunities are, where the quality of life is genuinely high, and maybe most importantly, how those things are stacking up against the financial realities on the ground right now.
Absolutely. And if we're talking Asia-Pacific hubs, you really have to start with Singapore. It's been the leader for so long. But what's really interesting, I think, in the data we're seeing is this core tension. Singapore still has this incredibly strong global appeal. It's almost unmatched, really. But it's facing serious pressure from rising costs, housing especially, and that financial squeeze. It's forcing people, global talent, to rethink things strategically. It's a real fork in the road for a lot of professionals.
Yeah, it's not just automatic anymore, is it? That Singapore is the default choice. The whole cost equation seems to have shifted things. So for this deep dive, let's first unpack the sources confirming Singapore's strengths, why it's still so attractive.
Yeah.
Then let's get into the details of that financial pressure, that cost crisis, and finally, we'll look at where some of that talent might be shifting to within the region. Okay, let's lay the groundwork. Why does Singapore still manage to be this premier spot for expats, for business capital, year after year? We see the rankings, but what are those foundational advantages keeping it right at the top, even with that higher price tag?
Well, the foundation is just incredibly solid, especially within Asia. You're talking about a really potent mix, very robust, stable economy, truly world-class infrastructure, and, a quality of life that promises predictability.
So,
Stability. And the data backs this up again and again. Take Mercer's Quality of Living City ranking for 2024. Singapore, right at the top for Asia. And
yeah,
listen to this. It's the only Asian city that made it into the global top 50.
the only one. Wow. That's not just a small lead. That says something.
It really does. It speaks volumes about its consistency, its reliability.
So when Mercer says top city, what does that actually mean for someone thinking of moving there? Is it just about safety or is it broader?
It's definitely broader. It's holistic. Their methodology looks at everything: public services, traffic, how stable the political environment is. And you see ECA International's location ratings report saying the same thing, essentially. It names Singapore the most livable city for East Asian overseas workers. The reasons they cite are very concrete: superior infrastructure, very low crime rates, and this is crucial for business, minimal socio-political tensions. For a company or a senior exec who needs things to run smoothly, that package is just invaluable.
Right, that stability must act like a magnet, an economic magnet. And you see it in the workforce numbers, right? Nearly 30% of Singapore's workforce are foreign national.
Exactly.
They're not just there for the nice weather. They're pulled in by that powerful services sector, comms, IT, and of course the huge financial services industry.
And that stability we talked about, it's not just a perk. For the C-suite, for regional HQs, it's often a non-negotiable. Singapore is known as a safe haven in the region for talent, for capital. It minimizes risk. You get access to established investment networks, a sophisticated regulatory environment. It's a reputation they've built over decades, and it's very hard for another city to just replicate that overnight.
Okay, so we've got the strong foundation, the appeal, but now the elephant in the room, the cost.
Oh,
What's
yeah.
really driving this? Why does it feel like such a crisis now? Singapore's always been pricey.
I think it's the speed and the volatility, not just the absolute cost. And the main driver, overwhelmingly, has been the housing market, specifically rentals. The instability there was, frankly, shocking. It didn't just creep up, it felt like it exploded. We saw rental prices jump by over 26% in 2022 alone.
26%
Yeah.
in 1 year. That's not a minor adjustment. That's a major shock for a family budget or a company trying to house its people.
It is massive, yes.
What triggered that specific spike? Was it just one thing?
It was kind of a perfect storm. The classic supply shock, really, made much worse by the pandemic. You had construction delays because of supply chain issues, so fewer new homes were finished. Then the borders reopened quite quickly, and expats and talent started flowing back in suddenly. So you had low supply crashing into soaring demand. Prices just went vertical. And to put that 26% in context, it was more than double the rental growth in places like London, Sydney, or New York during that same time.
Wow. Okay. So when you're facing that kind of price jump, especially in something as fundamental as housing, It must really mess with corporate planning. Long-term leases become a gamble.
Absolutely. It changes the game. When housing costs are that unpredictable, you see a shift. People become wary of locking into traditional 1 or 2 year leases at potentially peak prices. They start looking for more flexibility, safer options.
Which is where things like service departments come in.
Exactly. Extended stay solutions become much more attractive. Service departments, hotels geared for longer stays, they offer flexibility. Professionals, companies, they need somewhere reliable without that long-term, high-cost commitment hanging over them. It helps manage that market uncertainty.
Okay, so housing's the big one. Are there other factors squeezing budgets too?
Well, yeah. There's also the general financial pressure from the recent increase in the goods and services tax, the GST.
Yeah.
It might seem small on its own, but add it to the high housing costs, transport, just general living expenses. It all adds up. It eats into disposable income, makes the overall compensation package look less attractive unless salaries get a big bump, and companies are often hesitant there.
And it's not just abstract numbers. The sources mention real people making tough choices, like that marketing professional, Benedict Becker.
Right. He's a perfect example of this cost-driven shift. He moved to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Why? Purely to save money while keeping his remote job. It really highlights the trade-off people are weighing up. How much is Singapore's stability worth compared to potentially saving thousands just across the border? Especially if your job gives you that location flexibility. It's a calculation facing, lots of mid-level professionals and remote workers right now. And if you zoom out, stories like Becker's point to a clear trend. Expats and even some companies are actively looking at alternatives. The equation, like we said, is pretty simple. Where can you maintain a good quality of life but slash those costs?
But are they just swapping one set of problems for another? I mean, moving to KL, are they giving up that stability and top-tier infrastructure Singapore guarantees?
That's exactly the tension, isn't it? It's a trade-off. You're trading some of that predictability, maybe for significant savings. But the perception is that the quality of life gap isn't that huge anymore, especially for younger folks or those more willing to adapt. And other cities are definitely capitalizing on that.
So which alternatives are really emerging? We hear Malaysia a lot. What about Vietnam?
Malaysia, particularly Kuala Lumpur, is the most obvious one. It's right next door. Recruitment firms are seeing more interest in moving staff from Singapore to KL, and KL has a lot going for it. It's geographically close, has a large English-speaking population, the infrastructure is improving, and the cost of living is substantially lower. Huge savings potential there. But yeah, look, East and Vietnam is definitely part of the conversation. Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, they might not have Singapore's financial infrastructure yet, but they're becoming major tech hubs. And the cost of living is even lower than Malaysia's. So that attracts roles where cost is paramount. And younger professionals may be drawn to the dynamism, the growth. They might overlook some infrastructure issues for the savings and the experience.
Okay, but is this like a mass exodus? Or is it more segmented? Because I find it hard to picture, say, a top global CEO moving the family to Ho Chi Minh City just to save on rent.
No, absolutely not. And that's the critical nuance here. It really defines what's happening with talent in Asia. Singapore is definitely not losing everyone. The outflow is very segmented. For your senior executives, your regional heads, people whose jobs absolutely require being close to investors, regulators, the big financial institutions, Singapore is still the #1 choice, hands down. That power center, that financial hub status, it's irreplaceable at that level. So what the evidence suggests is a split. The more cost-sensitive roles, maybe mid-level management, remote workers, they're the ones exploring KL, exploring Vietnam. But the top-tier, capital-driven decision-making roles, they're largely staying put. The risk calculation just doesn't favor moving for them.
Right. So for you listening, it really depends on where you sit. Are you anchored by the need for that top-level proximity, or is cost reduction the driving factor? So given this dynamic high cost pushing out some mid-level talent, what does it mean for Singapore's market stability long-term?
Yeah.
And what's the government doing about it? Are they just letting it happen?
Oh, they're definitely not just sitting back. They've been quite open about acknowledging the rental market issues, recognizing the pandemic shock played a big role in restricting housing supply. Their main strategy seems to be tackling that supply side head-on. They're predicting that rental prices should stabilize, maybe even come down a bit, because a lot of new housing is scheduled for completion over the next few years. We're talking thousands of new units, both public housing, HDB, and private condos, hitting the market. The idea is that this big influx of supply will cool things down by addressing that core supply-demand imbalance that caused the huge price surge.
Okay, so fixing the structural housing supply issue makes sense. But what about attracting the talent they really don't want to lose? those top-tier folks.
Yeah, they're definitely focused on that too, making sure Singapore stays competitive for the absolute highest level of talent globally. The most high-profile move there is probably the new Overseas Networks and Expertise Pass, the One Pass visa.
The one pass. What's different about that one? How is it strategic?
Well, it's really designed as a sort of rainmaker visa. It targets very high earners, people making at least $30,000 a month, or individuals with exceptional achievements in fields like arts, sports, science, academia. And crucially, it offers much more flexibility than older work passes. Holders can start, run, and work for multiple companies in Singapore simultaneously. That's quite different. Plus, their spouse gets a pass that lets them work too, which makes the whole package more attractive for families. It sends a clear signal. Singapore isn't just trying to fill jobs, it's actively recruiting innovators, top entrepreneurs, people who will drive future growth.
Okay, so let's boil this down. The key takeaway for you listening seems to be this. Singapore absolutely holds on to its top global ranking. That's down to its incredible infrastructure, its stability, the deep economic opportunities there. It's still the anchor for Asian finance, that guaranteed safe harbor. But the cost equation has shifted dramatically, especially for mid-level professionals, remote workers. And that's driving a noticeable strategic dispersal of some talent to nearby, more affordable cities like KL or even Ho Chi Minh City.
Right. Which leads us to a final thought, maybe something for you to mull over. Given the government's efforts to stabilize things, more housing coming, these elite visas, how much of a financial incentive does it really take? How much do you need to save in, say, KL to make it worth giving up that proximity to the core financial hub in Singapore, that potential career acceleration you get just by being there? It's that fundamental trade-off, isn't it? Savings versus potentially career momentum.
A really interesting question to leave things on,
Mm.
and that wraps up this deep dive into the shifting map of Asia-Pacific talent hubs. We hope this gives you some clarity for your own planning or your next move.